the Fantastic Sports Podcast. I'm your host this week again, Henry Brophy, and here I am with our guest, Will Horton. Works for Kambi, a sports betting company, partner with Penn Gaming, among other companies. How are you doing today, Will?
Doing fantastic. About yourself, Henry?
I'm doing pretty well. So first off, what is your new position, and what are your daily responsibilities for
Sure
Kambi?
thing. Yeah. So I am a partner manager at Kambi. I work exclusively at the moment with Rivers Casino, also known as Bet Rivers. They're located in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Illinois, New York, many other states. And we essentially are the fourth biggest sports book in the U.S. at the moment, do a margin of about 7%. The total market, which is pretty good, I say, for the fourth biggest sports book. I essentially am their account manager in plain speak. So I essentially work with them on a day-to-day basis, making sure all their needs are met, but also making sure that my company Kambi isn't overstepping their bounds and it isn't overpromising. So I'm kind of that middleman between my company and the actual sports book itself.
Mm-hmm. And so working for a sports betting company, there's probably like some inside information that you hear. Like, are you able to bet for like using the sports book, even though you work for them?
It's a great question. So the way it works is that I can't use any of our partners' sportsbooks. So I can't use Barstool Sportsbook, can't use Rivers, Parks, any of those. But I'm free to bet on competitors, FanDuel, DraftKings. So there is no insider information in the sense that I can actually see bets that are made and placed through our partner sites. But the reason I can't go and usually bet on my own sites is because realistically I could go in and cancel my own bet or void it or withdraw it before the actual event has happened. So there's obvious reasons why we don't have that, and it's complicated, but it makes sense. Essentially, yes, I can sports bet.
Yeah, it could definitely get out of hand if you start voiding your own bets. So like it's kind of weird. Like, I don't know. It's such a weird concept working for a sports company and like using other, like, your competitor. How does it, like, do you actually sports bet yourself?
So I do pretty often. Big NFL sports better. Wouldn't say I'm successful at it,
Nah.
despite some of the inside numbers and tracks. And I can see sharp bettors, better known as wise guys in our company, where the real VIPs and they bet these extremely large sums of money and kind of see the trends there. So I do bet myself, usually $5 to $10, $20 max. Keep the limits low. Also, I think it's just smart to do it that way. Sports betting in general, I think, is a lot of fun and will get you a lot more invested in the match itself. But I don't like to tell people to bet large sums of money because it is still gambling after all.
Yeah, I just started sports betting myself recently, and I don't know. I've just been doing way too many parlays, and the parlays are just donations.
Parlays, I think they're a lot of fun, and it's a great concept. But you do got to be smart about it. People that throw these like long odd parlays out there for $5-10, no problems with that. But it's these people that I think constantly are hoping that, like, oh, this is the big one where we bet 3-4, especially with NFL, because I love the NFL, but as the season has proven, anybody can be anybody at any given week. So you really just want to make smart decisions and don't bet what you can't, and try to make smart bets. Try to make a spread bet or a money line, something simple. That's my advice if you ever do want to start into it, but don't overcomplicate the process when it's already pretty complicated.
Yeah, I think definitely a lot of people just see like the odds increase and they're like, wow, this is how much I can win, and they just keep that more.
It's fun. Yeah. It's honestly, I enjoy it more just following along to see where the trends are and to see what happens through the week. NFL is really unique, unlike a lot of other sports where the lines go up pretty early in the week, and they'll go up usually following Monday's games. So all these week's matchups are already online, especially all the Thanksgiving Day games that we got going. But certain sports like MLB and NBA, they usually come online 2 days max before, because there's so much information that's changing. Who's going to start, who's going to not, is everybody playing, all that kind of stuff. So it really is unique, and every sport is treated very differently, I can assure you.
Do you have like a different perspective now that you work for a sports betting company, and then like seeing like lines change and like the different boosts that are given?
Absolutely. So before this, I was working with the NFL, and it was the complete opposite, where you could not sports bet at all, not even on anything. Any sport didn't matter in season, NFL. So it was totally very different in the sense that where I'm at now, it's pretty much welcomed and almost encouraged to the point where I think it makes the job a lot more interesting. So now that I am in the sports betting side of things, I definitely have some insights, and I watched the game very differently than I did before even the NFL. Before I joined the NFL, I just watched it as like a casual fan, but you really do get to witness the side of like the bettor itself and the high rollers and the VIPs, and you get to see what they're betting on and the trends there, and it really does shape exactly what they're looking for and the edge they're trying to find that so many others constantly think that they have, but they really don't.
Yeah.
And so you really do got to strike that balance. So, but it is fun. I mean, I enjoy it, especially like I said, keep the limits low. Don't overpromise what you can't bet and afford to. But I really enjoy it, especially like the World Cup's going on. That's one of our biggest markets this year, and we expect a lot of turnover in the millions. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely don't want it to get out of hand with in regards to gambling. But how has the more widespread legalization of sports betting affected you in your work?
It's been really beneficial for our company, plainly spoken. We're now live in about 32 states, with Ohio coming hopefully the 1st of January. A couple other states, hopefully in the horizon too. Massachusetts down the road is promising. And so getting these bigger states, like California, we just had both of our propositions declined, so we won't be getting it there. But it really is interesting, especially when these bigger states start to join. New York was a state that joined in 2022, and that's quickly become maybe our number 2 market after Pennsylvania and New Jersey, which are still, they were some of the 2 first states that actually we went live in 2018 when gambling was legalized in the United States. But it really is interesting to see which states will and won't. Traditionally, you'll find that your more southern conservative states are hesitant, but also states like Massachusetts have been, and California, well, 2 of the more liberal states have also been kind of hesitant to actually support it. So you really do get to see the actual interest behind it. A lot of the polls and stuff suggest that it's a lot more popular than people realize. And so getting to see how this will all shape out in the next couple months, I think is really exciting, especially, with the promise of 2 to 3 more states added in the next quarter. I think it would be really exciting for our company and for sports betting in the U.S.
Yeah, it's weird. When I first started sports betting, I downloaded one of the, I think it was DraftKings or something, when I was on my way down to visit my friend at Charleston. And I was in a state where I could bet legally, and then we crossed the border, and I tried to put my bet in.
Yeah.
And I was sorry, you're not in the right area. I was like, dang. But
they're pretty hardcore with those lines. Like I was in California just last week, and it's obviously not legal there. And so I did set myself a reminder for all right, this is the bet I want to make. When I do get back to New Jersey, Pennsylvania, this is what I'm going to place once I'm back across legal lines. They are pretty hardcore on it for obvious reasons. You don't want to do anything illegal, but the geography, kind of tracking that they do on your phone to make sure you're in the proper state limits, they're pretty hardcore about that, which they should be.
Yeah. And has the growth of the industry made it harder or easier?
A little bit of both. Harder in the sense that there are a lot of competitors out there. FanDuel and DraftKings being probably our 2 biggest. DraftKings was formerly with Kambi, my company, and they left us about a year ago to kind of develop their own software platform. But it is make it easier in the sense that the more states we're live in, the more successful we are. At the same time, we are a global company. We do have a lot of partners that are located in the UK and Europe, one in South Africa, one in Australia. So we are a global presence. But at the same time, the US is so new to it because it was only legalized in 2018 and we're not even live in all 50 states in DC. It will really be interesting to see how we kind of shape this, because in certain states like New York, they have a 51% tax that they set for any sportsbook to join. And their licenses are pretty limited. So a lot of these states, essentially, when they first join, their licenses are limited. They'll give these out to certain sports books. So it's about usually 4 to 5, and then they eventually open up and apply for a little bit more after those first couple months. But you'll find that states that just join are very strict with what they allow, and they limit what people can bet on. For instance, New Jersey, which is the oldest state that's sports betting has been legalized in the US, you can't bet on like a Princeton team or Rutgers players, for instance, because they just don't, they think, oh, insider knowledge, or people are located here, they know it. Well, I differ with those policies, but I understand why they're in place. With every state also comes new regulations. 50 states, it's essentially 50 different countries. So you really do have to make sure we're going by all the rules and limitations. We have our own department here that kind of sees to that. And the rest of the world, I'd say, is a lot more advanced than the US is. So we're getting there. So, but I would expect us to probably catch up and be maybe the second biggest market in sports betting in probably 5 years' time.
That's interesting. I actually never knew that Rutgers and Princeton didn't allow betting on that game.
Oh, it's New Jersey in general. You can't bet on any New Jersey teams. So certain states, that's the way it is. Virginia also has some interesting guidelines. New York, they're pretty open. PA is also pretty open. Michigan, for example, you can't bet on a negative result. For instance, you can't bet on a player to throw an interception. So it's just, I don't know why they have these. It's more up to the regulators and these actual states that decide these things. But we do have to stand by them and make sure that we're also not allowing our bettors to actually make bets on these things in those states.
How has, like, I actually saw a rumor recently, and obviously there's no confirmation, but people were thinking that, like, you see those big parlays that are done like $1 to win like tens of thousands. I saw someone say that they think that those are just posted as like fake, like they're not real, just to like kind of like get people to like try to start doing them.
I can assure you that they're not. I mean, it's very, very rare for these to hit. For instance, my company just allowed now 20 combinations, so essentially 20 matches, 20 games that you can bet on. Previously, it was 16, and before that, it was at 12. So you do find that it's very, very rare. The margin for these to hit is so low, but it's also the possibility of the what if. So a lot of our partners feel some risk that they don't want to take these on and allow these parlays to go on, because it could just higher and higher risk numbers and more money that they could potentially lose. But if you really looked at the numbers behind it, it makes so much sense for them to have it, because they're so low to hit. I mean, it's hard to hit a 4-game parlay, but you really just kind of have to be smart about it, which we do. We have a risk team that kind of calculates all that here at Kambi. But at the same time, they do hit, but it's sparingly. Like, we can look in our systems, and I could probably find 2 that have hit just for the NFL Sundays, but they're low. But I do find that most of the ones that are actually posted online, if they make it there, they're accurate, and if they're not, they're very easy to tell if they're not.
Yeah. It's crazy. Like, even some of the most favorite things lose. Like early this morning, Argentina losing to Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia was like plus 2,200 or so.
Yeah.
But
it's awesome. I mean, that's the beauty of sports. Why it's my favorite thing, because you never know. Like, we have just had 2 World Cup draws in the last 2 matches, and France, Australia, that's prone to probably be another more of a blowout, more like a England, Iran, in my opinion. But you never know. That's why they play it, and you really do get to see the trends that are people betting on, who's favored, where's most of the money going to, where's the normal money going to, the wise guy money. So getting to see all the actual numbers behind it, which I'm a numbers person, I think it's totally fascinating. You really get to see what people like betting on. Was it corner kicks or overtime or full-time stoppage? Soccer, to me, is by far our number one global sport that's bet on. Makes no surprise, it's the world's most popular sport. But the World Cup is such like a national market, so you really get to see, all right, who do we think is going to win this whole thing? Brazil, Argentina, France, they were some of the major favorites. And those results have been pretty shocking so far, I would say. So, but it's really looking to the rest of this week's group stages and see kind of how it all shapes out in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah. Soccer is also a weird sport to bet on for me, just because, like, for other sports, there's like yards and catches, like points, rebounds, assists. But soccer, it's like corner kicks, like yellow cards, red cards, like
draws is personally my favorite thing to bet on in soccer. In the Euros, I cleaned up very well a couple years ago, when I would just bet after 90-minute draw, and I think I won maybe 5 or 6 matches that way. And but then the soccer is interesting in the way that you can bet on a full-time stop, or you can bet on like to win the game or to lift the trophy. Sometimes it's usually what it's called. So you do have to pay attention to what you're actually betting on. It's the one sport. It'd be like in NFL. It's like, oh, at this point in the match, so this team's leading, or at the end of the game, including overtime. So you really do have to make sure you're betting on the right thing with soccer, and they will get you, but it's intentional because they want people to kind of think like, oh, well, I think after 90 minutes this team's going to be leading, but they really, what if it's extra time, and then past the group stages we have overtime and then shootout, penalty kicks, all that kind of stuff. So you really do got to make sure you know exactly what you're betting on before you place that bet.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I bet on Philly Union to beat LAFC in the MLS Cup, and I bet on their money line, and it went to extra time, and it didn't hit. Like, it didn't even allow, like, if they won in extra time, it wasn't going to let me.
Didn't matter. Yeah. After 90 minutes time, they usually have to have a description in there, but sometimes they don't. So make sure you're always reading all the extra information in there. It's there for a reason, to not trick people, but at the same time, people still do fall for it, and they bet on things that they think that they're going to win, but it's actually a completely separate bet offer.
Yeah, it's pretty frustrating. So thank you for coming on today. It was awesome hearing from you, having some insider knowledge on the sports betting industry.
No problem, man. I appreciate you guys having me. It's pleasure to be here. So thank you.
All right, have a good one.
Thanks, Henry.
All right, now on to the section with Jake. Here's Jake Malik.
How you doing, man?
Good. How are you?
Good, dude. I was listening to that interview. Will's a fun dude. He's got a lot to say.
Yeah. He's a nice guy. I've actually known him for a decent amount of time. He bought me one of my first legal drinks.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, what do you say? It's your sister's friend, sister's coworker, right?
Friend.
Okay. Yeah, that's cool. That's cool, man. He like I said, he had some really interesting insider knowledge. I love that stuff.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting that, like, working for it, they allow them to bet on like competitive.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny you said. I was thinking that because, and this is one of the topics we kind of discussed previously. Maybe we talk about today, and if we have time, we will. I harken back to Calvin Ridley in the NFL, right? Like, he's working for an organization that it affects. The NFL and gambling are intertwined, right? Same thing with Will. They're intertwined. He's in a gambling company, but he can use other ones, and it's so weird to think like, that's a direct competitor. I was shocked to hear that. I thought his answer was like, no, we can't bet on it. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense, because maybe you asked the question, maybe he has insider knowledge. Like, my immediate thought was, if he's watching the trends of what people are betting on, maybe he gets like a feel like, oh, a lot of people are betting on the Lakers to win the championship this year. Maybe there's something that I don't know yet. I should hop on that train because the odds are good. I would think because of that, they're like, no, you can't do this because they know something, or they could cheat, quote unquote, like by knowing something that we don't as the public.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Like Vegas, people always are like, Vegas, they got something.
Yeah.
Something
when Vegas makes lines, I'm convinced like they always know something that we as the general public do not. And it's why they always win, and the general public almost always loses. They know something we don't, and it's too late by the time we've made the bet.
Yeah. I may have mentioned this before, like the Justin Herbert, there was a boost over the season for him to throw one touchdown pass.
He didn't.
It was a plus 100. And it was the first game in like 38 or 39 games that he didn't throw a touchdown pass.
It's like, come on. What are the odds?
Yeah.
Like, the odds of him throwing a touchdown were so high. What do? You bet on him to throw one. What does he do? He doesn't throw it.
Yeah. It's wild.
That's betting in a nutshell, which is, I tell you, it's why I don't bet. And that's why, because I am so convinced the most obvious things to happen, like you said, what was the soccer match you were talking about that was like plus 2,200 or something? It was this morning, right?
Yeah, this morning. Argentina versus Saudi Arabia. Plus
2,200. Name a time when that bet doesn't hit.
Yeah.
It just doesn't happen. And then what happens? It doesn't hit.
Yeah. It's insane.
It's insane. But yeah, I mean, do you want to talk about Calvin Ridley for a minute? Because I brought it up because I just think it's such an interesting story, and it kind of works with him talking about that he can bet, but this is like one of those stories where it's like, well, you can't, but it's a similar kind of scenario. You know what I mean? Yeah. I
definitely think Calvin Ridley, like, being suspended for it definitely makes sense. But it's just weird. Like he was suspended a whole entire season. And then you
Right.
look at some of the other like people who are suspended for like either performance enhancing or like sexual harassment, like Deshaun
Yeah.
Watson, and you're like,
Dude, you read my mind.
why is this person like suspended more
Henry, you
games?
are reading my mind. And this is why I brought it up, is because like Will can bet on sports, on any sports at all, as long as it's not with his company. So he has, insider information. He doesn't really, as he said, but like he can see the trends, like I said. So his company is obviously, quote unquote, in bed with gambling, but he can also participate. And then you look at Calvin Ridley, his company, the NFL, is in bed with gambling, but he can't. And it's such a weird double standard. And then I swear you are reading my mind, because that was what I was going to get to is, Deshaun Watson is my favorite example of this. And he did something so much more egregious, right? Like there's no question what he did was awful. These 30 plus women he's accused of doing just awful things to them. And he gets suspended, like 12 weeks? So he gets that. And Calvin Ridley, which I think it's fair to agree, he didn't do anything nearly as bad. Like, okay, yeah, he broke the rules. I understand that. But what he did was not nearly as bad, right?
Yeah.
And he gets suspended a full season.
It's also because he wasn't playing in the games that he bet on.
Right. It reminds me of like Pete Rose, right? Pete Rose is one of the greatest baseball players ever. What did he get in trouble for? He was betting. But was he playing? Yeah. So he was, when he got in trouble, he was at least involved. Calvin Ridley wasn't even involved. And my favorite part of all of it, he bet against his own team.
Yeah.
He didn't even bet for his own team to win. It's not like he had this insider knowledge that his team was going to. He said, nah, this is my team. I actually expect them to lose. Is it just me, or is it like almost hypocritical of the NFL to say, well, we're in bed with big betting, but you can't do it, and we're going to penalize you, super heavily as compared to some other guys? Is it just me, or is that maybe a little? I think it's unfair.
Yeah, it is pretty ridiculous. If you watch an NFL game, there's commercials every time there's a commercial. There's betting, FanDuel, DraftKings, whatever it may be. They always have like the partnership.
Yeah.
And then they're like, I don't know. It's a little odd.
It feels so like a mixed message, right? Like they're like, oh yeah, go gamble, fans. But then their players do it. And I understand why their players don't. Like, I will tell you this. I can understand why they don't. Like, it makes sense to me. But then turning around and promoting it, to me, just feels it just feels backhanded and wrong and a bit hypocritical almost. Like, I don't know. I'm not saying players should be able to. Again, I think we both would agree, like, they shouldn't be able to because they could affect the outcomes. If Calvin Ridley bets on himself when he's playing, he can intentionally screw up something so he wins money. Not that these players need more money, but they could, right? Like, no question about that.
It's like Tim Donaghy, like the NBA rep on it.
Yeah, that's a great example that I didn't think of. You're absolutely correct. Like, that's why it's not allowed, and that's fine. But it just feels wrong that the NFL says, okay, my company can't, but everybody else can bet on us. It just, I don't know. It feels like an inappropriate exclusion and a double standard that they're setting, right? Like, either accept it completely or don't. And I'm cool with them saying we don't accept it, but don't penalize your players as heavily too. Like, I think that's the part that'll bother me the most, and you would probably agree. Deshaun Watson, I'm going to use him as the example again. Like, Deshaun got so heavily suspended, but Calvin Ridley did something far like less terrible, I guess I could say, and he gets a whole year. Like, am I missing something? Is there?
Like, he did something that it was against the rules, but when you compare it to somebody who was doing something against the law, and he was suspended for less games, the guy was breaking the law. Like, it just doesn't.
Yeah, and this is not the only example, right? I mean, how many players have abused a woman, been in trouble for sexual assault, or broken the law in a number of ways? I mean, Henry, how often does it happen? Unfortunately,
way too often.
All the time, right? I mean, the Browns alone have two guys on the same side of the football that have both broken the law. Kareem Hunt, I'll put it, say he assaulted a woman, and Deshaun Watson, in a different sense, also assaulted many women, and the two combined, I don't remember. Do you remember how much Kareem Hunt was suspended? I think it was only a couple games, right? Like he was cut. His actual suspension was a couple games.
Yeah, I think it was pretty lean, like maybe like 4 to 6 or so.
Yeah, right. So, and the reason I bring that up is because I thought of this as we're talking, right? Kareem Hunt, which I'm going to find out as we speak, what his suspension was, but Deshaun Watson gets under a season. Okay, he was suspended 8 games, so it was more than we were called, which is fine.
But still way less than
right. But when you think about it like this, and I'll leave it on this note. This is my last comment on this because I'm getting annoyed and I'm getting frustrated by the way the NFL does things. Calvin Ridley gets suspended for a full season, so almost like if let's say his team's making the playoffs, it's over 20 weeks. Let's just argue that his team makes the playoffs, right? Over 20 weeks. When you combine Deshaun Watson and Kareem Hunt, you get also 20 weeks because Deshaun for 12, he comes back in week 13, Kareem Hunt for 8. So if Calvin Ridley and the Falcons were to make the playoffs, you're telling me that 2 players that both broke the law and did something really egregious are going to be penalized the equivalent to a guy that bet on games that he wasn't even playing on.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just the whole thing. It's a mess. And look, I don't think anything's going to change. Roger Goodell's going to do what he does. But it just, the whole thing doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I think they need a better system on how to find these punishments or what length of these punishments.
Yeah. And this is not to say that gambling is bad for the NFL. I think it's great. But something's got to be changed.
Yeah.
Henry, do we have anything else we want to talk about before we wrap this up?
Don't think so. I think we're looking pretty good.
All right. Then I'm going to steal the show for about 2 seconds.
Yep.
Our next episode, which I believe comes out in about 2 weeks, if you like this content, you might want to stick around because our next one, I have a friend of mine and a guy I've interviewed a couple times. He works for a sports book. He helps set the lines. So you want to talk about insider information, Henry? Yeah. I got a guy. He's got some information. He's got some good stories. Hopefully, there is a story about him and Floyd Mayweather that I won't tell now. I'll have to see if he's willing to share that story again with me because I love that story.
Yeah.
But he's the best. Rafael Esperanza. He's an awesome dude. He'll be on our next episode. So check that out. It's going to be a fun one. He's going to have some good information. And so Henry, I'll throw it to you to wrap this up. Say what you guys say, but I just wanted to tell the folks at home, hey, if you like this stuff, there's a good interview coming next time.
Yep, definitely. Well, that'll be all this week for the Fantastic Sports Podcast. I'm your host this week, Henry Brophy.
Everybody have a good one. We'll see you next time.